Good evening and welcome to DarkHour Paranormal. I am your host, once again, Michael Roser. And tonight on this lovely December evening, folks, I thought I might keep true to the moniker of DarkHour Paranormal. And tonight and going forward, I'm going to be introducing some more paranormal investigation teams to you through the show. But tonight, I have a special treat. We have a fantastic crew out of Minnesota, known as the Minnesota Spirit Hunters, MNSH as the acronym. Now, one thing I will say about many of the paranormal outfits that are out there today, and believe me, there are few and far between left from once we started back, let's say, 15 years ago or so. Now, with that in mind, one of the things I really respect about the groups that are still out there and broadcasting their information, their evidence, their experiences is the fact that they're still doing it. Now, again, as I mentioned, this is a rarity to find a group that is still so passionate. As I was mentioning this to Lisa off camera just before the show, so many groups have disbanded, or life had gotten in the way, and they chose to work with family or move away from the outfit that they had been with in the location, and instead of integrating that passion, they leave it behind. Now, you may say, okay, perhaps that's their path. Perhaps that's as far as they needed to take it. And I think in some respects, that is more or less the case in some circumstances. But there are certainly still many who are out there spearheading this field. And of course, we're seeing some of those evidences, but it's not on television, folks. You're not seeing the true evidence or hearing the true experiences when you're watching some of these ghost shows on television. It's just not the case. They're there for entertainment. They're there to open you up to the idea that this is a possibility. And in my opinion, not a whole lot more. Although I will say I really enjoyed some of the locations that Ghost Adventures had gotten their foot on. Sons of bitches, I'm so jealous still. If anybody wants to give me a ride out to Poveglia Island in Italy, shoot me an email. I'll be there in a heartbeat. Well, listen, folks, we're not going to extenuate this intro too long. I'd like to get into the meat of things here. Tonight, I have Lisa and I have Marcus, the founder of Minnesota Spirit Hunters. And tonight, we're going to be speaking with them at length about their work, their experiences, and what might be coming next. So, without further ado, as we all love to say, you could have said it with me. I'd like to introduce to you Lisa and Marcus. Lisa and Marcus, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. What a privilege to have folks who are so passionate. Hey, it's my pleasure, man. I'll let you know, I think there's a little lag, so we'll keep that in mind as we go forward. If somebody doesn't say something, I'll hold for a moment to hear your response.
Okay.
You guys have been working as a team for how long now?
So we opened in early 2020. I have completely revamped my team members, and we only have 3 of us that are the original. So Lisa is one of my newer ones. I did a whole lot of revamping, and I feel like I'm just in the perfect spot right now and kind of buckled down with just the right people right now.
It's so important to have the right people join an outfit like this. I could reference a good friend of mine who has his own outfit. I won't say the name on the books, if you will, just out of respect. This person has done everything in his power to find the right people, and he's been cycling through folks and having some of the toughest luck. I mean, maybe that's partly his fault, but in the end, these are the experiences. And today, as passionate as he is, like all of us here, he doesn't have any support underneath him. And again, I think it goes with, the waning interest, people being saturated with this stuff for over 20, 25 years now. I think Taps came out in the late 90s. So, we following these ghost shows and interests in paranormal activity and so forth for quite some time. Again, I think the public at large has become quite saturated with this element. Let me ask you this. Were you, either of you, ever involved in an official paranormal investigation outfit prior to your creation, Marcus, of the Minnesota Spirit Hunters?
So before the Minnesota Spirit Hunters, I actually had 2 other teams. The second team that I had, I don't want to disclose anything about it because we were open for probably about 2 weeks and we did nothing. However, the first team that I opened is kind of where I got my passion for this investigation stuff. Because once I figured out that that first team was actually going to go somewhere, I wanted to know more. I wanted to do more, and I was more curious. Before I opened that first team, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no interest in it, and I thought people were
Mm-hmm.
absolutely nuts. So, for some people out there, for some people out there who believe in this word, you could call me a skeptic before I opened the team. So,
Well, it's a good place to come from. Honestly, I think
Mm-hmm.
skepticism is very healthy. You have to keep critical thinking at the helm. This is something that so many people who are thirsty for an experience, for an answer that they, can fit into a specific mold within their belief system, this is where they get caught up.
mhm,
You hear something in the next room, you feel a cold breeze, go through you. There may not be a logical explanation at that moment, but as much as we
right,
understand how electromagnetic frequencies work, what do you do first when you pull out a kg meter? You're going to shoot the house looking for areas that are consistent in way of wiring, in way of
mhm,
Yep.
plumbing, and all sorts of different things that give off this EMF. Once you rule
Yep.
that out, then you can go down further. And I, again, think people get caught up in the previous endeavor rather than, sticking to the ladder and continuing forward to question every angle. Now,
yes,
I've gotten the easy stuff out of the way. All right. The path we're going to go down next is a little bit more comprehensive, and I'd like to really get your deepest thoughts on some of these questions that I have, or I'm going to propose to you. All right.
yep,
The first one, and what I'll do is I'll ask the question, and Lisa, why don't you take it first, then Marcus,
Sure.
jump right on that, just so that everybody has a
absolutely.
voice.
Oh,
Okay.
sure.
We understand the importance of marketing ourselves in way of interests and professions, but I find some of the images that paranormal groups overall tend to exhibit are somewhat over the top, maybe gimmicky, or in some circumstances superfluous. What are your thoughts on the image paranormal investigation groups portray, and how might this impact the inquiries sent their way or the business they're attempting to build?
I mean, you wanna get yourself out there to be true. You don't want to have too much gimmicky stuff or anything that looks kind of like fake or like ghost adventures and taps and stuff like that. Because a lot of times people are not wanting to believe like you're an actual team. Like, what are you really trying to do? Just be true and honest to your beliefs with yourself and your team, and don't try to mask anything. I believe by being more honest out there with the public on who you are is a
Mm-hmm.
better outcome than anything. And just show who your team is and what you do.
Mhm.
Very good. Marcus, would you like to take the lead?
Yes, actually, I would like to kind of elaborate a little on what Lisa said. In the field, it's all about being a team. Going out to these investigations, you can't do this stuff alone. You, clarity is number one in the field. You always want justification. After you find something, you want somebody else to look at it again and say, there's a logical explanation for this. If there's no explanation, then you always, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, I forgot what the word was, but you always want somebody to kind of double check your work.
Mm-hmm.
And
Hmm.
the second thing that I can honestly say is never fake anything.
Yeah.
If you find something, if you're not getting anything at an investigation, you're not getting anything. If you don't get a
Hmm.
single spike on your K2 meter, you don't get a single spike. If you feel something, say that you feel it. Don't just say that you feel it if you don't. So always be sure that everything is real. It's all about, real paranormal investigating instead of faking everything to get the
Hmm.
views.
Once you fake something and lose your integrity, that's it, folks. In this
Yeah,
field, you are done. Put the towel up
absolutely.
and walk away because you can't redeem yourself. People will
Yep.
remember this for years, decades, who knows, centuries to come. I
Hmm.
don't know, made the last part up, but I can tell you from personal experience, seeing this happen with other people that folks don't forget in this field.
Yeah.
I think it is important to certainly have somebody check your work, but there are many who have the let's say the gall, I guess, not to be pejorative in any way, to go out to some of these locations by themselves and have these experiences. Do you recommend that folks go out and take on these endeavors themselves? And if not, why not?
Lisa, you start.
Never investigate alone. Because if you are seriously going to go to like where you can come across negative energies that can actually take over your body, can drain you to the point that you could be sitting down or just kind of like not knowing what to do, and you're not safe by yourself, you wouldn't be able to call for help or anything. What if you come across like maybe like a lot of people out there right now with negative energies, they automatically think, hey, it's a demon type thing right away, which sometimes is not. But you got to keep yourself safe. Don't ever go, because how can you find help if you're by yourself? I've seen a lot of people be drained in person and struggling where they can't even come out of it, where their anxiety has taken control. They can't even talk. And if they didn't have someone there to keep them safe, who knows what could happen? You could go missing. You could go, I mean, anything could happen. And it's really scary in this field.
Yes.
And yep, go ahead. I was gonna ask you. You bring up some of the consequences of going out on your own, and although I won't sit here and disagree with you entirely, I'd like to know a little bit more about your interpretation of the nature of that sort of interaction that you mentioned, wherein a spirit can, perhaps attach itself to you. Some people call it possession. Where do both of you stand in way of a spirit attaching itself to you? And if you have any idea of the mechanics of that, suggesting perhaps the auric field rather than the physical body, although it has an impact, what are your thoughts on that versus the classic idea of possession? And do you believe that people can be overtaken against their will in this way?
So, honestly, what I can say is in the field, it tends to be if you are alone in something, spirits, entities, demons, angels, whatever, seem to find you more vulnerable and easier to mess with. Now, what I can say, possession is not always 100% the factor. You have to really screw up to get kind of possessed, if you know what I mean. I don't believe that possession is a number one thing in the field. I have been kind of steered by a spirit before. I don't know if we're going to call it possession, but I have been taken over. I didn't get hurt or anything by it. I was just out of it. I wasn't with it. Didn't know where I was. So it's definitely possible. The science behind how it happens or why it happens is what I'm still trying to find some research on.
In way of this particular phenomenon, I've researched many different cultures that either hold the belief of possession or don't. And I find that the majority of the time, there's something in way of the line of cultural belief that leads to this. Perhaps we can even call it superstition, and, people continue to make this real. Even folks who are interested in seeing some examples of this, we go to the voodoo culture, wherein, this is a common occurrence where people are possessed, and even in certain intentions, they're going into trance meditations to do just this, where it appears a spirit takes over the body. In my own experiences and peripheral research on this subject, I have come to understand, and at this point, this is my take on it, that no spirit can actually take over your physical body. And you can talk about Annalise Michaels and some of the other people who apparently looked like, in a way of degradation physically, that this spirit was just taking the toll. What we didn't understand at the time of Annalise Michaels is that she also had mental illness. And we also find this, you mentioned weakness, Marcus, as perhaps a door or a fissure that some of this energy can come in. If you nurture it within your experience, within perhaps, let's talk about etherics or auric field, giving it the attention and the knowledge in, possibly a fearful way or one that exhibits no control over the situation. Just like anybody, a tyrant could come and, give you this backhand and keep you under some sort of perceived control. We've seen many examples of women who have been abducted by male captors who have had their way, and in some circumstances, after months or even years, they escape. Okay. To me, it's similar in a sense. I don't know how some of these women got into the situation. Obviously, it was involuntarily. But that being said, I equate this in a certain way to the spirit world. You allow it to come in. And I'll give you an example of that weakness, too. There was an investigator who worked with a team that I'm familiar with, and this woman was highly clairvoyant, one of the best sensitives that you would know. The problem was she had her own personal conflicts in life, and when she would enter into any space that would be deemed to be negative in way of energy, she would become violently ill right on the spot, collapsing, had to be dragged out of the house, out of the location, wherever it is. Eventually, she was out of a job in that way, if you will. But it was because she did not take care of herself. And, it could have been something simple as, constant use of a substance. It weakens your psychic energy. It weakens your auric field. So when you step in there, you're not grounded in yourself. Guess what? You might invite something to come in and perhaps feed on this energy. We've often heard that these spirits or entities, I'll call them, because who knows if they're actual spirits. Right. This is a predatory universe. And, if that's a form of energy that they're feeding off of, hey, we seem to be ripe for the picking, especially in our dualistic nature as we stand today. Speaking of clairvoyance, if clairvoyance present, let me just try this again. If clairvoyance present a more intuitive interpretation of the paranormal, and what we've pined for most readily is smoking gun evidence physically, other than apophenic correlations, what role should a psychic play in paranormal investigations?
Psychics, mediums, sensitives, they can be useful, but there are people out there. You have to be careful. There are people out there that can just mimic that and just like pretend that they're feeling or seeing something, especially if they research the location ahead of time. A lot of times when you are in those roles, you want to go to that location with no information, because all of a sudden, if you've done your investigation as an investigator and your psychic or your medium or sensitive or clairvoyant says something about the location that you know about, then you kind of know that there's probably something real there.
I think as much as that comment is absolutely fantastic, I think I was alluding more to the clairvoyant as an instrument. Let's say you have somebody that you trust, and within your paranormal team you have 4 or 5 people. One of them is the house clairvoyant. Is that person really necessary in way of your overall presentation when you give this in the end, when you collect the evidence that you've gathered and you sit down and you say, okay, the only thing, and I'll point this out, the only thing that I've found in way of this really working for our left brain to, be happy about it, is if the psychic walks in, again, completely unaware of the location, that would be the best thing to do, of course, and then comes out with some things, and as you go through the investigation, there's a corroboration somewhere. To me, that's pretty impactful, and yet at the same time, some people can stand there and say, well, it's still sort of anecdotal from the clairvoyant. I mean, I don't believe in clairvoyance, or what, even if this woman is or man is spot on. What are your thoughts, again, about a psychic being used as an instrument? Is this necessary? And if it is, why? You guys can jump in. Whoever wants to. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, do you really have to use them as an instrument? Probably not, but I think it just depends. I mean, I've seen a lot of other teams that have mediums and stuff that they like to use them for like the dowsing rods, especially because their energy seems to go through those dowsing rods and have more connection to the spirit world, as they say. I don't know if it's like really 100% that you really need. I've seen teams that don't run with mediums, or psychics or anything like that, and still get similar evidence. I mean, I guess it's just gonna be based on your opinion and your beliefs that are going on. It's just on you, on the decision that you want to do.
So my take on that is kind of it's not a bad idea to have mediums and clairvoyance and everything, because the fact of the matter is us investigators, we can't do what the mediums do. We can't feel and we can't hear and talk to them in our head. We're using equipment and we're doing this and that and holding a camera. They're getting actual um, real things from these spirits and entities or whatever. That does not mean that they're always necessary as a prop in an investigation.
Hmm.
An investigation can be productive without a medium and clairvoyant.
Certainly.
Is it always going to be 100%? I don't want to give an answer on that because I can't quite give an answer because I definitely think that they're not a bad instrument, tool, or whatever to have at an investigation. So that's
Well,
kind of my take on it. I've always had a medium on the team from day one.
Hmm.
So I don't really know how an investigation runs without a medium, if you know what I mean. You know.
well, Marcus, think about when we went to that cemetery and we split off in two teams. You had mediums, I did not.
Hmm.
And we had more encounters, a spirit activity with one of my spirited dolls that I came versus when you ran with our medium. So I guess it just really, really depends because I
Exactly.
was actually pretty shocked. I ran with two of our newest investigators and camera guy, and we had some awesome hits that we have actually on Facebook also of that live investigation.
You guys can also check out their work. Every link is in the description. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, webpage. Go and check out their work. These guys do fantastic stuff, and I certainly implore you to give it a go. Hey, Third Phase of Moon, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. They say, gotta give paranormal investigators props. Getting ghost footage is tough. And they ask, why is it so hard to capture entities? Before you answer that question there, I want to let you guys know Third Phase of Moon has been doing some excellent work always. So go and check out their channel. Of course, you'll find me over there as well. You'll find the whole Third Phase of Moon panel from time to time. And of course, they lead this fantastic Third Phase UFO report that, Rich Giordano and myself essentially are putting content out with. So if you're not familiar, folks, go and check out these guys. They are the largest UFO channel on YouTube. Thank you so much, my good friends, Third Phase of Moon. And again, they asked, why is it so hard to capture entities?
You know, entities and spirits and stuff are very stubborn. Some of them are very stubborn. Some of them want to be heard, and they want to be seen, and they want you to know that they're there. It's hard to catch an entity if they are stubborn because they're going to be like, "Why are you in my house?" or "Why are you here?" This is my place, so get out. I'm not going to show myself because I don't want you here. So it really depends on the entity.
It doesn't always just depend on the entity or that spirit. Also because it depends on you as a person. If you go in there, I've seen if you have more of a calm nature, they're more likely wanting to have that curiosity of maybe know who you are. If you go in with a lot of fear or a lot of like negative energy, they're going to stay away and not present themselves like they would want you because you are feeding them of, I don't know you, I don't like you, I have nothing to say to you. And going in more with a more clear head and soft calm usually can get better responses.
I find that what you guys are saying to be absolutely true, wherein there is a personality behind a lot of these entities. Whether we can say that they were human at one point in time, is really up to conjecture. But at the same time, there are some that seem to exhibit at least spatial awareness within the space that we're occupying. When we get into dimensions and talking about consciousness, they're completely interrelated. And I do recall, and I can't tell you if this was faked, but it was impactful. And if somebody has information on this particular episode I'm going to talk about in just a moment here, please let me know. Some years ago, I believe it was Ghost Hunters, and I'll only reference them in a positive light once. And I can tell you why. But nonetheless, there was an episode where they were in an old manor of sort, and they're asking the question, who's here? Are you here? And all of a sudden you hear a gruff voice, a southern voice say, yeah, I'm here. Where are you? So it seemed that the spirit could hear and was looking for these people the same way that maybe we could hear him and we're looking for him as well. But the crossover just isn't there in way of perception. Doesn't mean that that spirit isn't occupying the same space. Doesn't mean that you aren't in that same space as well. And of course, when you come in with something on your shoulder, whatever your intention is, spirit, at least in my experience, will know how true that is before you do, if you decide to walk into one of these locations. But again, this is the universe. What does the universe do? You ask, it reflects, you get. Sometimes you just think about it, reflects, you get. So again, we talk about thoughts manifesting, how much we need to be in control of our thoughts, especially when it comes to investigations like this, where you're going to be tested mentally, you're going to be tested emotionally, and even in some circumstances physically. We've seen many examples of people gaining weakness, starting in cold sweats, personality changes. Again, these are influences of certain negative energies that you allow it to happen to you on a certain level. Nothing happens to you without permission. And yes, I can say that in way of contracts too. Again, this can be a little bit more subjective, but in the end, when we follow the path or the avenue that we travel, we can see when we look back exactly how things sat together. Is it possible what we do in the way of paranormal investigation, today attempting to connect and communicate with these spirits, our techniques simply accrued remembrances of what was natural to us in ancient times? So where we didn't need instruments outside of ourselves to contact and connect with spirit in ancient times, do you think that, in other words, we're just getting back into the remembrance of this connection, and this is how we're doing it in a mechanical sense overall?
That is a good question. I don't know. I think the way of paranormal investigation is definitely an interesting thing, and I literally got into it not too long ago. So the way of investigating, I think it kind of depends on the investigator and the team itself, and how they do everything. I do want to kind of elaborate on the last question that you had too. Some spirits think that they don't know that they are not alive anymore. They think that they're still alive and they're still living people. So kind of going into these investigations and talking to these spirits, like, they don't know that they're dead, like asking, how did you die, or something like that, is definitely not a question to ask, because then energy could start getting worse, because they're going to be like, oh my God, I'm dead, because they're going to think that they're still alive, some of them. And some of them do know that they're dead. But I just want to elaborate on that, and because we've ran into that occurrence a couple of times. So
There's also purportedly, a division when it comes, or a tiering system when it comes to the awareness, not only in this life, but, on the other side as well, wherein, there are people who die very suddenly. And as you mentioned, Marcus, they don't realize that they have passed on. And to them, it's a shock when they finally figure it out. Some of these people are so unconscious that when they pass over, they're not greeted by anything familiar. In fact, they may not even be aware of that pinhole ember of light somewhere in the back of their consciousness that they can turn towards and then cross into that next vibration. And yet, as you mentioned, there are some who still do have the comprehension of what happened to them in the physical life and that they had passed on. Maybe they're sticking around because there's a loved one who misses them so, and they feel it's appropriate to, perhaps give them their energy by presence, being still here in some way. There are certain circumstances that if somebody is on their last breath, say it's your grandmother or something like that, and you love her dearly, so, you don't want her to go. And in doing this and in sort of putting this energy forth, but hey, please stay with me, don't leave me, they actually will stay in their physical body for longer than they're naturally supposed to. So I find that very curious, and, some of the last thoughts that we have certainly do get carried over. From my understanding, you don't lose that ego identification, that personality entirely until you cross into that light. And my idea of why that might be is because vibration changes. Okay, it goes from being in a bad mood to a good mood, just to kind of give you the duality in way of example. So I think that's very curious. And yet at the same time, to bring back the original question, I think that we were very neutral when it came to working with these energies. And yes, there were what we would call negative entities and positive entities. Perhaps the ancient folks looked at them as gods, but long story short, they worked with both of them in some sort of harmony. They knew what they were for. Each one of them had purpose, and they were used magically, and therefore had a relationship with us. I sometimes wonder, when we come into contact with some of these darker energies, are they upset that we have lost the consciousness of that connection? What do you guys think about that?
Oh, it's definitely possible. I mean, there's a lot of negative energies and just energies and spirits alone, and trying to figure out why they're upset about something. I mean, it's kind of hard to say because we're not in their mind. Did they leave the world unhappy? Did they finally figure out, like, hey, I still want to be with my family. It wasn't my time to go yet. It's kind of what I have on that, I guess.
Hey, what we do here is, present topics and subjects to think about. I mean, very rarely do we come to anything conclusive, but that's just the nature of the field that we're in. There's a certain idea that human beings are actually multidimensional in a way of existence. As a consequence of consciousness, we experience a third dimension physically with a type of linearity, not aware of these other multidimensional aspects of ourselves, right? Is it possible that when we pass, we simply move our consciousness into another dimensional form? Or do you think that there's an idea of the disembodied spirit is indeed its own singular entity detached from the body? Now, let me just clarify that a little bit, because I know it was a little wordy when I came up with the idea. But basically what I'm trying to say is that you are still connected, in a sense, to the third dimension when you cross over. I mean, there may be this other aspect of you existing right now doing its own thing, and we could go up the vibrational levels in way of octaves and so forth, take it into the musical realm to explain why these particular copies or extensions may exist. So my question is, you're conscious in the physical body. The physical body passes away and still is part of that third dimensional experience. It rots, decays, becomes part of the material here. But we understand that body isn't us. So are we moving up? And again, in your opinions, are we moving up into that next etheric body, or is it just a natural, we pop out of the body and we're now separate from the physical and the ethereal?
That's actually a very interesting question. Never been asked that before, but in my
never been on the show before.
Exactly. My understanding is after you pass, your spirit comes out of the physical body and kind of does its own thing, crosses into the night, or is still in need of something, so it's going to want to hang around. It's a good question, because do we move up and kind of enter another body and live on longer? Like, are we still living longer than we actually live? Is very interesting question. I actually like to know that answer.
Lisa, what do you think?
Right. I mean, it kind of reminds me, like, my grandmother passed away in 2015, and I was actually at the hospital when she wasn't even, her eyes weren't open. She was just laying there. And next thing you know, my cousin was leaving, and my cousin says, "I'll see you tomorrow, Grandma." And what was super odd, because we all heard this, and you're looking at your loved one, not even conscious. Okay. All of a sudden we heard in her voice with nothing of okay. And we all looked at each other and we're like, "Grandma?" She was in that state of unconsciousness. Her eyes weren't open or anything. And I think she was getting ready to, like, maybe leave that body to get to that next level that we're talking about, because not too long after that occurred, I left the hospital, and I would say within about 15-20 minutes, she was deceased. So,
it's often.
it's really,
yep. Sorry. Go ahead. I mean to cut you off.
Interesting that you say that, because that made me think of that. Because all of a sudden we heard, and then all of a sudden she passed. So it's like maybe she wasn't going to that next level.
You know, I'm going to bring this up real quick. Hey, Marcus, do me a favor. If you're not speaking, do you mind just muting real quick? Just so we can hear through everything. It's often been mentioned that somebody who's in a coma or, has some sort of trauma wherein the body is unresponsive and the natural avenue is that they're going to pass away, they'll actually partially be out of their body the majority of the time, if not fully, with still that silver cord connected from the midsection to that physical body that they possessed, until they decide to let go. So for you to mention this story, I mean, it's not all that surprising to me, although it's fantastic and, absolutely phenomenal in way of that experience. It sort of corroborates, what I've found. So maybe there's more evidence of that, and we'll understand how the human energy, that soul or whatever you want to call it, does actually move its way in and out of vibration, because as I understand, it's a very fluid and very quick process for most people. Those who continue to experience the death, as I would call it, are those who aren't letting go or are fearful of crossing over, and that's the experience that they end up having. I've never been afraid to die. I'm afraid of the process of dying. Right? Because to me, that's where the suffering comes in. It's not that final moment where you say, oh, that's it, I'm going to die. You read people's last words on their deathbeds, and most of them are like, oh, wow, I can't believe this is what it's like. Wow, all right, I'll see you later, guys. And that's it. So that's a very interesting response. Now, back to your paranormal investigations here. Have you ever found any similarity in way of activity intensity, given a location to be hundreds of years old versus a location built within the last 50 years or less? Is there any significance in how old a construct is other than compounded history?
I don't know. I mean, we went to the Edinburgh Manor in Iowa, and that history is long. You're looking at like a farmhouse, and then hospital and asylum and everything. I don't know if it all goes by how old it is or the history of that. I think it just depends on where the spirits like to reside or where they like to go. I mean, it could be 2 years old, and I think we could get some things going on also. But also in that history too, our lands were like created years and years and years ago, like with the native lands and stuff like that, and the native spirits and stuff that did all their spiritual connections before us. So I mean, I guess you can go any way with that.
You hit the nail on the head, though. That's where I was going to go with this before, Marcus, I give you the turn there. The land. I mean, yes, there is topography that changes, terraforming, does happen, but it's still the same soil. It's still the same energy. There's record keepers in way of minerals in this ground. That energy is still there and present. You can look at any of the triangular paranormal areas in the world, even right where we are. I mean, you have the Bridgewater Triangle, you have the Ossipee Triangle, you have the Triangle in Vermont. You have all these different triangular areas that exhibit this sort of activity. I just find that very curious. Very quickly, Mysteria Dragonheart, thank you so much for the $3 super chat. And I have to say, there's another one. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Mysteria Dragonheart, one of the longtime supporters of DarkHour Paranormal and the proud owner of one hell of a collection of DarkHour Paranormal cups and cozies, which she has constructed herself. I have to say, I'm impressed. Marcus, what's your take on this, my friend?
Honestly, I was going to say the exact same thing. It all depends on the land. You're going to have this building, and it's going to be a 200-year-old building. And this place is super haunted. You got things going like crazy. Well, construction happens. It's tore down. And people are like, what a relief, because it's gone. Well, the new building gets up, and you're still getting this activity. Same activity, for that matter. That's because it's the same land. It is not going to get rid of a spirit by tearing down a building. The land is the key. If you want to get rid of a spirit, tearing down the building is not the way to go. So yes, Lisa, you hit it right on the head.
And I think though too, when we go into investigations or watching everyone or people who reach out to us, they don't realize that history of the land comes into play on what could be happening, because a lot of times it's just like, oh no, it's a demon there automatically. And it's like, well, what was there beforehand? I mean, with our team, we do like to find out, what was on the land prior to that. Was there a war back in where, were there the Native Americans when they had the war way back in history? I mean, you really want to look at the history of the land before you can start even saying any answers. Because like right now, we don't all have the answers for any of that.
Exactly.
That's some of the best things that have been said so far. I mean, in way of something very solid and concrete, where you start. Anybody who's interested in this field, listen to what Marcus and Lisa are saying. This is where you begin to inquire about a particular location. How many times have we heard a house being built on, a certain land, and the homeowners get in there and all of a sudden there's something anomalous happening? Nothing followed them. They've never had any experiences like this. Well, gee, I wonder where it came from. So at least we have an inkling at this point. Small little steps in this field. And again, corroboration makes them bigger steps as we move forward. Which takes me to a very interesting topic. And I'd like you to elaborate as much as you can on this, because I think this is very important. And we kind of touched upon the idea of contriving some of this evidence. In your opinion, how much have groups reported to hoax for the sake of entertainment, for example, TAPS, actually contributed to the field of paranormal investigation? So you have these groups that have hoaxed something. We know that their integrity is shot. How much have they actually contributed prior to their outing to the paranormal field? And you can choose any of the popular ghost teams or some that you may know that I'm not familiar with too. Again, you don't have to mention names like I just did.
So when it comes to faking the stuff that you get, will we ever know if somebody is faking or not? When you're experienced in the paranormal, as we have been doing this for quite a while, you can tell when somebody is faking something, because you'll see what they're doing and you're like, I did the exact same thing and I got something for real with a different reaction. Their reaction is fake. You can tell because they're not into it. They're not dedicated to it. They are kind of putting on a front to make you believe that it's real. So the fact that they're faking is it's beyond me, because I absolutely hate when people fake paranormal evidence, because like you said, you're going to lose all your credibility and you're never going to get it back. So, I definitely agree with that statement for sure.
Well, and just think how easy it is to fake something, right? You take your K2 meter. Okay. All of a sudden you might have like your cell phone. You might be holding it like this, right? All of a sudden it's going off and you're asking questions, even though it's giving like certain readings, but it's not like right on point questions. And it could just be your cell phone making a simple K2 like this, just kind of go off. Power lines. We come across somebody not too long back where the power lines are so connected to their home that all that EMF could be just from those power lines, where you have to have somebody come out and see, does something need to be blocked off? I think it's really easy to fake this stuff than anything, because we're not always going to get that evidence right away. I mean, we can go into locations, nothing's going to happen. I mean, it just depends. But
and if I can kind of elaborate on that, always in this field, you want to make sure that you debunk everything. If you lay down a voice recorder and you walk in the other room and you're doing whatever in there, and you come back to this voice recorder and you hear something as like something drops on the floor, search the floor, or something, see if something fell. Was that there when you left the room? You hear a car go by on your voice recorder, sorry. Check your cameras. Check, because always have your cameras facing every little angle of the place that you're investigating. If you hear a car go by on your voice recorder, go back and check your camera and see if a car actually went by.
Mm-hmm.
Debunking is key. And if you film your paranormal investigations, people want to see you debunk stuff on camera. That way,
Mm-hmm.
they have the evidence right there. They debunked it. It's not true. Or they debunked it. There's no way that could have happened. So it has to be paranormal.
Well, also Marcus too. So I'm gonna kind of go into it because we actually have his name as paranormal consultant. So he's been helping us get ready for our current investigation that we're going to. The other thing that he also taught us also is look at the community. What's in that area? What time frame? Because there's going to be a train that's going to be going off where we're going this weekend at a certain time. Is there a dog that lives 2 houses away? You want to make sure that you know your surrounding and what you're hearing before you say, oh my God, I just heard a dog on my EVP recorder when it could have been the dog next door or 2 doors down. Is there a restaurant with a bar across the street? People are drunk and all yelling and, having a good time, and you hear stuff. You really want to make sure what that surrounding is looking at and the time frames.
Mm-hmm.
I 100% agree with both of you. And one thing that Ghost Adventures did do very well was to have those corroborating, reels rolling so that, I think the Remington Arms Factory comes to mind first. There was some activity that was happening within the building, and they had captured it on at least 2 different audio devices, again, corroborating that this was the case. And they did identify that there were ambient sounds that, again, could be identified, but then there were others that couldn't. I don't want to, smear names or anything, but I do have to say that when it comes to taps, I did respect these guys quite a bit. And I'll give you an example of how crafty some of these people can be when it comes to hoaxing something. Now, I happed upon this, all right? We, as an investigational team about 12, 13 years ago, one of our first real big investigations was going to the Concord Colonial Inn in Massachusetts. Now, we didn't realize that Taps had been there, I think it was 8 months prior to me scheduling this, until I think it was a couple days before we decided to leave. And sure enough, I did see that they had put an episode out, so I watched it quickly, and I was like, oh, okay, interesting, this happens. All right, so we have an idea of maybe what might be there. They were pretty thorough, walking around with the same gentleman that we actually were toured with, talking about the activity within the area. Now, up in room 24, which is supposedly the haunted room of this particular inn, you open up the door. I had my hands full of equipment, one other guy with me. I push open the door, and as I do, I realize that this door is incredibly heavy, and it starts swinging back automatically and actually hit me in the face as I was trying to walk in. I thought it was just going to open, and I would be able to walk in with everything I had. Nope. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. All right, whatever. So I walk in, and as I push it further, I notice that it sticks up against the wall, catching itself on a little bit of raised carpet that's there. I was like, huh, okay. So I brought the stuff in, and as I walked in, I get past the threshold, and the person who was with me on this investigation walked next to the door. I think it was about 1.5 feet, 2 feet from the wall. As he stepped, the floor gave just slightly, because this is a very, very old building, and all of a sudden the door released. I said, wait a minute, that's really curious, because on the episode with Taps, you see these guys in this room, and there's a gentleman about 1.5 feet, 2 feet away from the door, and as he steps and shifts his weight, the door automatically releases and hits him in the butt. And he's like, oh my God, the ghost hit me in the ass. So we tried to recreate this, and I'll be damned that we actually did. And we couldn't see any other way that this could happen. Now, that was a very disappointing moment for me. But I gave the benefit of the doubt, saying, hey, you guys seem to be genuine. You're passionate about this, going to the best spots anybody's ever seen. You got to be doing something right. I just think it's really unfortunate, when people decide to do this, and it hurts more people than people even realize when it comes to perception and so forth. I do have a quick question for you from KM. Thanks for holding on, KM. I appreciate you. She says, can you ask what their most memorable encounter was? And I will piggyback that with, share with me your darkest encounter as well.
Ooh. I don't really know. I don't think I really have much of a darkest encounter at this time, but most memorable one is when we're at Edinburgh Manor. We actually had it recorded in our episode because Lisa got so excited. So there's a pool table there, right? And then two of our investigators went to play pool because we were trying to figure out, try to lure like spirits into this rec room. Next thing you know, they started playing pool. And all of a sudden you saw pool balls moving by itself. And I was like, what? Do you see that? And it happened again also. And we actually have it on our episode. And like we're talking about debunking, right, everybody? So one of our mediums that was there, he was like, well, let's see if there's like a curve in the table. Is there something that's making these balls move? Is it off? Is it not, level? We did everything with that. Everything was level, and everywhere the balls were moving, there was no explanation for it. I mean, it was like the coolest thing ever that I've ever seen.
Marcus?
So I think my most memorable moment is when I didn't go to the Edinburgh Manor. Lisa led that investigation herself, but we went to Ripley's, believe it or not, back in June of 2021.
You lucky sons of guns.
The one over in Wisconsin Dells is the one we went to. So we were up there. We were by Peter Curtin's actual real head and everything. And I'm standing there with our medium, Rochelle. And, I'm using the spirit box. I'm talking to Peter. I'm trying to get a response. I'm getting nothing at all. I have never heard the spirit box go off like it did before. All of a sudden, this spirit box says, Lisa, plain as day. Never heard a name come through the spirit box. However, if I can elaborate on that, every investigation we go to, Lisa's name comes through the spirit box. It's kind of funny.
You're the magnet, aren't you?
I think so, because I actually went to Maryland in November. Like I mentioned, Paranormal in the Funhouse YC that has been in the chat tonight. I did a filming with them, and I thought I was going to get through some investigation without my name being called, and we heard it several times throughout that. Yeah, I'm like the biggest magnet ever, I think. I don't know. It's really weird.
We find folks like you, not just in outfits like what you have here, but, there are folks that say, I'm a paranormal magnet. I'm a paranormal magnet. And I do believe that is the case with some people. In my professional opinion, I think that there is something that has been cultivated within that person at one point in time, perhaps not in this life, or incarnation, I should say, that they have the option to cultivate if they choose to. Some of them, it is their path to cultivate that. Others, they're just aware of this particular facet that they hold. I think that's incredibly interesting. Shit, what the hell was I just going to say to you? Oh, I put this out there. Paranormal consultant, I think in way of asking you your darkest experience, says darkest meeting paranormal consultant. And listen,
his name
paranormal
is
consultant.
actually Matt Barron also, so...
Matt Barron, I want to thank you for subscribing, and thank you all for the new faces I see here tonight. There are quite a few of you, and I appreciate you tuning in. And, of course, please like and subscribe. It does help the algorithm. Hit that notification bell. You guys know what to do.
Some of these guys...
Something else I was going to say.
Some of these guys in the comments are hunter magnets. Everywhere the hunters go, these guys go. So
yeah, I'm seeing a lot. So it's actually nice to see. It's awesome.
Nothing wrong with having a following. Now, that being said, out there, guys, if you have an outfit yourself or you consider yourself a paranormal investigator, shoot me an email. Let's have a conversation. Maybe we'll have you on the show. DarkHourParanormalLive at gmail.com. It's also in the description. Reach out to me. We'll talk. Let me ask you another question here as we still have a bit of time. Now, this is purely a subjective question. I'll precursor it that way. Do you think if other civilizations are existing on other celestial bodies, that they may experience certain paranormal activity as well? Or do you think it's more confined to our own human experience, correlating directly vibrational levels of consciousness? Again, this is an opinion, certainly. Is Earth the only place that would have this? Are we the only civilization that possibly has experienced this sort of thing?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, there's a lot of different types of religions out there and everything that have experienced it, you have every either Muslims or Egyptians, Native Americans, their cultivation and stuff, they've experienced different things also. I don't think it's just us like right now. I think it's as a whole.
If we were to go to the moon, or if we were to set foot on Mars like we're going to soon, okay, do you think that there's a possibility? I mean, purportedly, there have been many ancient cultures, and we could do a whole slew of shows on that when it comes to celestial bodies. Do you think any of these guys that go out and set foot on these celestial planets may actually experience something in way of the history of that planet in a paranormal sense?
I actually think that that's actually a good question. I'm not 100% educated on that, and like you said, it's an opinion. I'm actually very curious. Will we have supernatural on other planets where nobody has been? There's been no civilization. Will we have this other world on another planet? My take on that is, in the spirit realm, I think, in my opinion, anything is possible. You know, so it is a very, very much a possibility that maybe there will be spirits and maybe there will be supernatural angel, demon, entity, whatever, to be able to go wherever they want. They're spirits. They can do whatever they want, so that's my take on it.
I would certainly suggest that because, again, we talk about the universe mirroring itself, and there are many, many examples that we could come up with in this respect. I would suggest that because everything seems to exist in the same space on different vibrational levels, and the time itself is not linear, if there were cultures that existed on these other celestial bodies, yes, you'd be immersed in them the same way that you go to Machu Picchu or Göbekli Tepe or, any of these other ancient sites that, you can visit and feel something. I think it would be very curious if one of these folks that, have decided to volunteer and have been picked by Elon Musk to go out to Mars were considered a sensitive. I wonder what they might feel, because God only knows. With the history that, Richard Hoagland brings up when it comes to the moon specifically, I would just imagine that you would be ensconced in that same type of energy field as well. Whether you're able to perceive it or not probably ends up on the personality and the person in general. Fantastic answers, by the way. I mean, these aren't easy questions, and a lot of them require a little bit of, little thought behind it. But you guys knew what you were getting into when you were coming on this show, so I appreciate you doing just that.
You're making us think. It's like, whoa, explode. How do you answer this? I don't want to look like an idiot on here,
No, not at all.
It is the dark hour, after all.
You better believe it, my friend. Let there be light. Right. On these questions, of course, is what I mean. Listen, when it comes to the paranormal investigations, I find that the organization of a team to be one of the most faulty areas within a paranormal outfit. How do you, Marcus, I think I'm going to direct this specifically at you. I mean, Lisa, obviously, please chime in if you have something on this. How do you keep your team organized off the field? Okay, and within the field.
Whew. That's a big one.
There's a lot of people who need to hear this answer.
Marcus, you can do it.
Yes. Keeping the team organized, keeping their mind in the right place. We have monthly team meetings. If we have anything that we need to go over, anything new added, or even an investigation, I will call in a mandatory team meeting. We will bring everybody in. We'll talk about the requirements for each thing, what we need to change, what others think we need to change, and kind of giving everybody a chance to voice, to throw their voice out. And if somebody leaves a suggestion, or if I have suggestions, then we put it into action. And it kind of helps everybody stay on track, because if we're having monthly meetings, it's not like we go on an investigation, these guys don't hear from me for 3 months. I am always setting stuff up. I'm always communicating. We have a full-on group chat on Facebook. I have team emails where I email every single thing to everybody. So we're very organized in the field.
That's a fantastic thing to have because honestly, if you don't have organization, your team falls apart. And I've seen it happen way too many times, and I've been certainly on the back seat end of things, behind the scenes, helping some organizations to do just that: get nice and organized, get the right people, go through the screening process. You need to run
Yeah.
background checks, do that too, because you don't know who you're getting. You could have somebody who is very interested in this type of work, and you decide to take them out on an investigation. Next thing you know, something really awry happens, and you're left scratching your head, and you find out later that this person has had negative attachments since the age of 12. It's happened to me. I brought somebody out on an investigation. All she said was, I have an interest and I'd love to do this, but she had a possession at the age of 5 or 6, the way she described it. Priests were called in, you name it. This was a whole endeavor. And that's the last person I'm taking on one of these investigations unless they're grounded so solid you can't move them like their feet were in cement. But most times it's not the case.
Right.
Again, even in an investigation. Now, I think I really liked what you said earlier, Lisa, where you said, one of these investigations, Marcus, we went on, I went off to the left without psychics, you went off to the right with psychics. What is the general format, if you have one, when you go and approach a paranormal location? Do you have any of the history beyond what somebody has purported, say, hey, I need you to investigate this? Do you have any predispositions walking in? And once you set foot into that parlor and you say, here's how we're going to set up, how do you determine your home base, and how do you set out the routine and plan for the rest of the night given each person who's with you?
So actually, what we do outside of the investigation is we talk with the investigators. We leave the mediums out of everything. We research the place and figure out where would the best place to put our base be. Like this investigation that we have this weekend, we've researched this place so much, and us investigators know a ton about the place. The mediums know nothing because we have disclosed nothing to them. Determining where the base and stuff goes is hard when you're doing it online. And if the location is either in another state or it's hours away, you don't have time, or you don't have a day to go do a walkthrough and see this is where we're going to sit something, and this is what we're going to do here, and this is what we're going to do here. You got to kind of play it as you go, if you know what I mean. So literally we were looking at the house, figuring out where to put base, and we have a good idea of where to put it and everything. So
Well, and also to kind of backtrack a little bit with the teams too. One thing I wanted to hit on is to have your full team and to work together. Communication is the key. Trust,
one thing
respect.
you have.
If you don't have any of that, it's not worth even trying to figure out to get a team together, especially if you have 1 or 2 people. If they can't commit to that of communication, trust, and respect, then why move forward? Now, however, Marcus, for the home base, we also, to kind of back up Marcus a little bit, you want to make sure you have a location that's not going to contaminate your area that you're getting your evidence in, because the equipment that you have could be setting some stuff off. So you want to make sure that it's somewhere that it's not going to contaminate that area.
Fantastic answers from both of you. Honestly, this has been such a joy to interview both of you. I do have one more question I'd like to impart, if you're willing. What do you visualize the future to hold for paranormal investigation at large? Where are we headed within this field?
I definitely think we have a big future of paranormal investigation. Matt Barron, our paranormal consultant, has put together a thing called ParaUnity, where a bunch of teams get together, hang out, do an investigation, get to know each other. I think if we keep going strong, we keep showing that we're dedicated to this team, we eventually could take over the internet and be, one of the number one things in the world. Paranormal investigation, it's kind of at the bottom of the totem pole right now because not a lot of people are believers. They think we're crazy for doing what we do. eventually we all are going to take over after a while. We just keep pushing and we keep working together. We're going to have a voice in this paranormal field.
What about you, Lisa? What are your thoughts on that? Very well said, by the way, Marcus.
I mean, I agree with Marcus too, is we all have to work together, working with other teams also. And just keep yourself true, okay? Don't try to go up there and make some hoax. Don't try to, because you're not always going to get an EVP off your digital recorder. Don't fake that stuff. As soon as you start faking that stuff, you're out the door. No one's going to trust or believe you. Talking and collabing with other teams, whether they're within your community or you branch out to other states, like we have actually been reaching out and collabing with a lot of teams now out in the state and just building that trust. I think that eventually there are a lot of skeptics out there. And the more evidence that we can show that is true and not like a hoax, or we can debunk everything, I think a lot of people are going to probably change their minds and it's going to get really big.
I have somebody who wanted to ask a question. I'm just going to see very quickly if they'll chime out real quick. It seems like they had asked it earlier and I might have missed it, so I'll hang tight for just a moment on that. I wonder, too, where the technology is going when it comes to paranormal investigation. I think Ghost Adventures was working with a gentleman who they started collabing with when they investigated his home, looking for his daughter who had passed away untimely, and they sure enough did find a lot of evidence in her room wherein there was not only herself but many spirits that were coming and going, sort of popping in, waving hello, and then going back out. But what this gentleman was doing prior to being involved with the television show was creating his own unique instruments that would capture certain esoteric evidence. And of course, Ghost Adventures had taken him on the team at one point and were basically demonstrating and testing, experimenting with all of these different types of equipment. Do you think that we're going to be more technological moving forward, or do you think that we'll be getting back to our roots in way of intuition, and perhaps the disclosure of paranormal activity is more of an interpersonal experience rather than something we may all get collectively?
The way it's kind of going, it just seems like everybody is like going more on what the equipment is trying to tell you instead of your intuition itself. I mean, your intuition with the equipment can go together. And like you're saying, like there's people out there that create unique equipment that is way different and trying new things to see if it actually works or not. But it's a really good question. But I just think that the technology piece, people are going to still create stuff, and they might try to go, okay, we're going to take this water bottle and, do something with it and see if we can get somewhere, to touch it or talk or something. Just come up with unique things. Going back maybe years back, I don't foresee that really going on because a lot of people don't have trust in their intuitions themselves. And you should. You should have that positive with your intuition and what you're feeling, and not always have to have the equipment. The equipment can be there to kind of help validate too with whatever your intuition is also. Don't always just go on what your equipment is and go by that.
Very well said. Marcus, you want to chime in on that before I throw out this question to you?
I actually think Lisa hit it right on the head.
I figured as much. Honestly, I figured as much. It's an off-world Skeletor, Adam. I know who you are. Son of a gun. He says, if spirits see a living spectrum of light and technology is a dead space, wait, hold on, what is this? If spirits see a living spectrum, excuse me, spirits see a living spectrum of light and technology is a dead space, they avoid. I'm not sure if I understand that off-world. Do you guys catch the gist of that by any chance?
So what I think he means, if spirits see a living spectrum of light and technology, is it a dead space they avoid?
Okay, I understand where you're going with it.
So, honestly, I don't think
Good
it's
question.
something. I don't think it's some. Am I unmuted? Yeah, I am. Sorry. I don't think it's something that they avoid. I think it's something they kind of pay more attention to. It's a really good question. You guys got my brain just thinking here. So, but I definitely don't think it's something that they're gonna avoid. I definitely think that they're gonna make themselves more known. Then again, it could go the opposite way, So it's definitely something to think about for sure.
Yeah, and I would say though too, that they might avoid that because they might think, especially like we were talking about earlier, do they realize that they are deceased and maybe they don't want to cross over and they're thinking that light's going to have them leave their family for good. They might just try to avoid that because they're going to be like, oh my gosh, there's that light. I remember if I see that, I'm going to go away for good. I'm not going to be able to keep an eye on my grandchildren and future grandchildren and stuff like that. So they might just try to avoid that space overall.
Now the thing with that is there something that attracts them to this light and to the spectrum? Is there a way that it's going to kind of suck them in? If they accomplished everything in life, what if that light and that spectrum actually takes them? Because they feel like they have everything accomplished, so they feel like they're ready to pass on into the light. So it's definitely something to think about for sure.
Well, you are moving into another paradigm going into that light. You are leaving everything else behind you. In fact, what I understand is that when you get over to the other side, in certain capacities, you can recreate whatever part of your life or whatever part of the world you'd like to live in, and you can exist there in the house that you grew up in with all of your friends and family that you had in life for as long as you'd fucking well do it. All right? But the point of the matter is here that the angelic vibrational beings will eventually approach you and say, listen, it's time. Come on. And eventually, these people are guided towards the light because I guess there is a certain set of things that can be accomplished within this perception or this way of existence, but they have boundaries like we do here. So eventually, we move forward again in way of vibration, and that is when you have your life review. It's not exactly the moment you cross over. It's when you go into the light and go back into that all, if you will, for lack of a better explanation, and then you have the life review wherein then you decide when and how and if you decide to reincarnate as a human being again, and so forth, the players that will be involved, and the karma that is yours to create and negotiate. It's not any sort of judgment that says there's an effect of karma. If you do A, B will always happen to you. It doesn't work that way. You are the sole judge and jury when it comes to all of this, folks. And I think that as time goes on, we're going to be seeing more evidence of that in way at least of the anecdotal, because, I mean, Christ, you can't go to the other side, grab a flower that's glowing from within, and haul it back over here to Earth and show everybody where you've been. God's garden. It doesn't work like that. But I can tell you of an incredible visceral experience that I had, either having a near-death experience or going so deeply into dream that it is real. And there are ways to determine if something like that is actually real versus imagination. Of course, something we can get into on the other show, another show. Very quickly, Off-World, I'm going to entertain this one very quickly. He asks, do you think technology hurts them? And I'm going to answer this one flat out, absolutely not. And the reason that I believe that is because everything is comprised of electromagnetic energy, including the devices, especially the devices that we use. Now, most of the time, the way that these devices work in general is that the spirit is able to connect on an electromagnetic level and therefore interact, and that's how we have the bridge. It's the electromagnetic fields that are the bridge of our communication. But fantastic questions, guys. I really appreciate that. Listen, we're going to wind up the show. Oh, we have a little guest here. Oh, how you doing there, kiddo? What a fantastic looking kid. Looks just like you. Don't tell your wife.
This is actually the culprit of the screaming.
Oh, that's okay. She's up. She's excited as we are. You know what I mean?
Every time Dad gets on a podcast, she wants to be on it too.
Oh, well, you know what? You might have a future investigator on your hands, my friend. We never know who will be interested.
I knew Paranormal Consultant was going to say what he actually said. He says that every time. Star of the show.
You better believe it, my friend.
Say goodbye, everybody.
Bye, kiddo. Thanks for joining us. Listen, folks, we're going to wrap up the show for the evening. I want to remind each and every one of you that you can find Minnesota Spirit Hunters all of their contacts and information down in the description below. If you'd like to say it in your own words, Lisa or Marcus, by all means, please do.
Yes. So you can actually find us on Facebook, YouTube. We have Twitter, Instagram. We have we don't use our Patreon anymore, so we're not going to go with that. But we have merchandise out on Spreadshirt. I can send you the link, Dark Hour, and you can post that out if you would like. Also, we are a partner with dsghost.com where you can get paranormal equipment for 10% off everything site-wide using code MNSH. It's definitely affordable equipment on top of this discount. So definitely it's something to check out. But yeah, I couldn't have said it better, man. You got all of our links. It's in the description. Check us out. We would love for you to check us out. We're also live this weekend at the Boyd House for a 21-hour investigation.
Awesome.
So
all
the new faces here, we would love to see you come on over and watch us.
Please do, folks.
We'll go live on that.
That, I mean, again, as I kind of talked about earlier in the show, there are very few organizations with the passion and withal that are still going out on a consistent basis. Of course, it's easy for life to overtake us. As Marcus and I were speaking earlier, we're both fathers. We both have full-time jobs. We both run our own, paranormal inquiries, if you will. And yet we make that time. I mean, personally today, I'm on 14 hours right now. It's fine. You know what? Because this is more energizing than anything else I've done today. And yet it probably took just as much energy. Listen, thank you both so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute honor speaking to both of you. I'd love to reconnect with you very, very soon and have an update on, some of these investigations, because we didn't get a chance to really get into some of your specific work in way of the investigations. I think maybe next time we could approach that, having some of these esoteric questions out in front of us and, in the air for us to eventually let land softly or, with more vigor.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually have something to propose to you. You have introduced us to your fan base. I would like to introduce you to our fan base and get you on our Wednesday night Minnesota SpiritCast.
And I would love to do that. I think you gave me an option a little bit later into 2020, if I recall, correct?
2022.
2022. Jesus Christ. Wow, where's my head? There's that 14 hours for you, folks.
We're right at the end of
that. Yeah, absolutely. But we would love for you to come on over to our podcast every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Central Time. And we are actually one more episode, and we'll be scheduled all the way until the beginning of April. So very busy. If you want an episode,
come on by this weekend too, Dark Hour. When we go live, we're gonna be going live probably for minimum 30 minutes at a time throughout that investigation. Come check us out and see our investigation style and stuff too, and what's happening.
Hey, just do me a favor. Send me a link in the email if you would. I have, tons of things to go through. So if you make it direct, I will be more than happy to join in with you guys and say hello and see what you're doing.
I'll put urgent with some red bells up beside urgent.
Right?
I'd appreciate it. As long as you wrap it in a bow for the holidays, we'll be good to go.
Might as well. The fireworks for New Year's.
You better believe it, man. And hopefully there will be some fireworks in the best of ways on this investigation, and you guys will be able to capture those so that we may witness them too. Listen, thank you once again. I'm just going to take you off for a moment. If you'd like to stick around for me to say my proper goodbyes. If you have to go, I understand. Otherwise, please just hang tight, and I'll be right back in the green room. So,
sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so
Lisa
much.
and Marcus.
Bye, everybody.
Oh, wow. Fantastic show. No, listen, I mean, I know that there are some people who come on the show have no idea what they're getting themselves into. And, they do the best that they can. And most of the times it works out fantastically. Lisa and Marcus had been aware of the show and they knew what kind of questions were coming. And I have to tell you, buoyancy is the word I would use to describe this interview. They kept themselves up. Very well spoken, fantastic answers, and I am, once again, as I've mentioned, very honored to have Minnesota Spirit Hunters with us today. And as I said, going forward, we will be having more of these investigational teams. There are still many of them out there, and we get different perspectives when it comes to this. Sometimes I'm asking the same question reworded in a different way or having a little bit more flair on one of the aspects that I'd like to touch on. And yet, I always get different responses. Truth of the matter is, I'm always looking for the correlations, the consistencies within these accounts. And I have to say, I've found quite a few, and I hope you folks have too, at least in the way of inquiry and continuing on your own path of curiosity. Excuse me. When it comes to the paranormal. So, thank you all for joining us tonight. Moderators, you do a fantastic job. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Super chatters, thank you so much for contributing and supporting Dark Hour Paranormal. And folks, we will be back next week with another fantastic show. So in the meantime, stay vigilant, stay critical, and stay... I don't know, I missed that last one, so sorry. For some reason, that outro, that last tagline has not been my strong point. Can't tell you why. But we'll work on that, as I've said. You know what? I did work on it. I just forgot it. Well, we'll get it next time. Hey, Joe Tate, what's going on? It's been a while since I've seen you here. Nice to see you. And once again, thank you all of the supporters just coming in here. Yes, Jack Buoyancy. They kept themselves afloat, and very well, my friend. A little metaphor for you. All right, folks. Listen, take care of yourselves. You got the holidays coming up here. We're not there yet, but almost. Stay vigilant within this nebulous field. And please, if you have your own stories or you'd like to speak to me on any level, shoot me an email, darkhournormallive@gmail.com. I might take a day to get back to you, but I always will. Thank you so much, folks. Ciao.